Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Hello, Patrick Donoghue here, news editor with the Irish Farmers Journal. With the silage season in full swing, we have advice every week in the Irish Farmers Journal. Dairy editor Jack Kennedy and livestock specialist Kieran Maley share their top tips with our digital editor Thomas Hubert.
Well, a few tips I would say is don't miss the weather opportunity when it's there. If you have silage that's ready to cut, go in and cut it. And we would say to lads, look, target, there's a compromise between yield and bulk, absolutely, but once seed head starts to emerge, the quality declines fairly rapidly. So once you see the seed head there, you should begin to mow, and would say mow on a dry day, mow in the afternoon because the grass sugars will be higher. Try and get the grass spread out or as wide as possible, kicked out whatever inside an hour of cutting, get it raked up and lifted within 24 hours.
And so you've just mentioned sugars, but nitrogen is also being measured at the moment. What are you hearing back from farmers, Kieran, on this side?
Well, by and large, a few lads have started to take samples. They're getting the nitrogen levels tested. They're sort of working off a rule of thumb that 2 units of nitrogen would be used up per day of growth. And whether the goose is probably slightly higher because grass growths have gone so high. But so if you take it as a rough rule of thumb, 3 bags of fertiliser, maybe 2,000 to 3,000 gallons of slurry, that's about 100 units of nitrogen for a first cut. So we're talking about 50 days from sowing and closing update. Once the report comes in, that'll definitely clarify it, but by and large, most lads that have an analysis done, the nitrogen has now been used up and it's safe to cut. Wilting will also help if you think you're marginal and you want to avail of the opportunity this weekend. Getting a good wilt will also help bring down your nitrogen level in your grass.
Jack, on the dairy side, you've been talking to farmers around the country, seeing who's cut, who has not. What's the picture looking like?
I suppose the picture, Thomas, is that effectively maybe half the dairy farmers have started some first cut silage, and particularly those that are producing milk during the winter. They're obviously looking for a quality cut of silage, so they have taken an early cut with perhaps even a split cut. There's a lot of farmers that maybe have split the first crop, and it's another good tip that you, in terms of taking some of the first cut now, and perhaps even if it's only 10 days away, but you leaving the rest of the main crop until maybe another 10 days away. I suppose effectively, Thomas, those on dry ground that have not grazed in the spring or had a very early grazing, well, their crops seem to have matured in time for this band of good weather that has arrived now in the end of May, early June. Those on wetland are probably still waiting for the crop to mature, and you know they will wait another week or 10 days at least for the first cut the main first cut to come in. But in general, there's a lot of silage down, and some farmers are taking the opportunity to split the first crop.
Our front page last week, Jack, was about the silage costs going up. How are things playing out this week? Is this being confirmed?
Yeah, well, I mean, effectively, the front page story was about diesel prices and plastic prices increasing, even though oil prices are on an all-time low, albeit increasing slightly. But look at it, I mean, the cost of first cut silage will vary depending on yield. And if your yield is somewhere around 8 to 10 tons of dry matter per acre, well then you're looking at a cost over €200 per ton of dry matter. So it's 20 cents per kilo dry matter. If you get a very low yield in first cut, your price is going up. Okay, so you're looking at maybe closer to 220 or 230 euros per ton of dry matter, 24 cents per kilo dry matter. So as Kieran said, the optimum is to try and balance that yield and quality piece. And look at, I mean, a lot of farmers are making the decision now, because weather is good, they're not going to damage the ground, they have enough yield, the nitrogen's got out of it, and they're making a go at it this week.
Okay, thanks very much. There's a lot more in this week's Farmers Journal. Kieran has 10 tips to get the best quality silage out of your grassland, so don't miss this week's Irish Farmers Journal and our archives at farmersjournal.ie. Thank you.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
The delay in approving applications for the Targeted Agricultural Modernisation Scheme, or TAMS, is causing some serious difficulties for many farmers who can't start improvement works on their farm. My colleague Anthony Jordan spoke with one of them, Peter Luttrell from County Laois.
I made the application last September 2015, and when we were making the application, we were told the tranche was going to be open for 2 months, and after 2 months they would close it and open the second tranche the day after, but the first 2 months application would be processed immediately. So as it worked out, that first tranche was left open for an extra couple of months. A delay involved in starting the process of those applications. We thought we'd have our our approval by now. It's gone well into 2016 now. I know in my case, at the silage pit is one of the jobs I want to do, and it's getting very late now for building a silage pit this year, because the problem is I can't hire a contractor till I know I'm getting grant approval, and then when I go and contact the contractor, I don't know when he's going to be available, because everyone's going to have the same problem as regards getting their contractor. He's going to be on a day of work, and when you build a silage pit, you can't put silage in the next day. You wait for another month.
And how much of an impact will that have on your farming
It has
enterprise?
a big impact on my farming, because I have to put up a second silage pit. Well, from a silage effluent point of view, it's a lot easier to control the effluent from a pit than it is from bales. And I'm trying to keep within the parameters of the regulations by the department as regards effluent or whatever else. I have a river near my farm, and I want to do this job. I got planning permission. I'm prepared to spend the money, do the work, and keep within the parameters of the regulation being laid down by the department. But we're being restricted, and it's starting to smack very much now of the last scheme of the farm waste management.
And when were you hoping to get your approvals by?
Well, sure, I was hoping I'd have it by the end of last year. If they were going to process 2 months approvals, we'd expect the process within the next couple of months.
And have you contacted the department about this?
I've been on to Johnstown Castle on numerous occasions, and I want to be fair to the staff down there. They're wonderful. They're doing their best, and they understand our positions, and they said they're restricted in what they can do. It's an online application and it has to be processed accordingly.
And in terms of other farmers, do you know other farmers that are being restricted by these approvals?
I do know other farmers that have the same predicament, and when you go to an IFA meeting, you hear those farmers and how angry they are.
And what's the general perception among them farmers?
Well, the general perception is we're getting very poor delivery. As regards our basic payment application, it has been every year, say by the 15th or 16th of May. If we're a day late getting into that application online, there's a 1% penalty every day. But it's a different rule when it's working the other way.
Do you feel let down by what the department have done?
I'm very disappointed with the way they're treating us. Very disappointed.
Peter, thank you very, very much.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
There are just 3 weeks to go to the Brexit referendum in the UK, and my colleague Odile Evans continues her series on British farmers' opinion in this week's Irish Farmers Journal. She met Julian Godwin, a suckler and beef farmer from Kidderminster, who wants to leave the EU.
The beauty of the EU is we fill out an invoice and a delivery note, and it's like delivering it to Wales, okay? Whilst there'll be some more documentation if we were to come out of the EU, I'm sure, I don't think it'll stop the trade. If people want our hay or our products, traders always find ways to get things done. Whilst the EU is great as a free trade area, to me personally, and as a businessman, the downsides are outweighing the free trade benefits now. And I personally believe the trading environment will carry on outside the EU. We can probably, should we say, distance ourselves from some of the structural problems of the EU, such as the massive debt problems they've got in Spain, Italy, Greece, Portugal. We didn't go into the euro for a good reason. It was, we knew it was never going to really work. And that's why we stayed out of it. I mean, you speak from an Irish perspective, and perhaps it's working for you, but it would never have worked for us. And we had no need to go into it, and good job we stayed out of it, in our view. I think there'll be a bumpy ride for a couple of years, while things settle down. I think the pound will weaken, which obviously makes our exports cheaper, so good for, say, our land price. But we import a lot of fertiliser. Probably fertiliser get dearer for a time period. So there's pros and cons to any currency movement. There's winners and losers. So that'll be a bumpy ride. I think there'll be some grey areas in terms of regulation, the single farm payment, all that sort of stuff. Yeah. But that'll sort itself out in a couple of years.
And do you think the single farm payment, while obviously that wouldn't come from Europe, do you think that the UK government would?
I think the UK government will subsidise farmers to a degree. The current Tory government, I believe, would not want to maintain the current level of support. So I think that the level of support would continue to reduce. which is a worry. As we know, all agricultural production or most agricultural production around the world is subsidised in different ways, isn't it? Whether it's South America and North America. The only two countries I know that have got very little subsidy is Australia and New Zealand. I think probably the British government will offer less support, and that means we've got to become more efficient. We're going to have to sadly, farmers are going to have to get bigger, which means there's going to be less number of units, less families, and that's the sad thing about all this, is that if we've got lower commodity prices to compete on world markets, there'll be less farmers. The farms will be bigger and there'll be less farmers. Now the consequence of that is a cultural one. The question is, do we want to keep the people on the land? And that's the real biggie for me, because I'm a farmer's son. I grew up on a family farm. I went to a village school. We've got village shops, village pubs, all that sort of stuff. Lots of people living on the countryside. Do we want to maintain that? Is the question for the British government. Because if they want us to compete at world prices, that will go. There'll be an exodus of people from the countryside because the jobs won't be there.
What would your arguments for staying within the EU be?
Brexiteers are saying, we can have our cake and eat it. So we can get out of the EU and keep our free trade position. I'm sure there'll be some hoops to jump through, but I think we can overcome them. If we want to buy German cars, we'll carry on buying cars. If they want to buy British lamb or Worcestershire hay, they'll carry on buying it. There may be a few more hurdles in the way, but trade will carry on. But as a free trade area, the EU's worked fantastically. Where it's failed is, trying to have this one size fits all, top-down government, a whole load of bureaucracy in Brussels that nobody can vote for, nobody want. If we were outside Europe now, would there be a clamour for Britain to get into it? Probably not. We're the 4th, 5th, 6th largest economy in the world. Do we need to get into Europe? No, we need to look to India, need to look to China, need to look to South America, need to look to North America, further afield. And yes, Europe's on our doorstep and they're our friends and our partners, and we don't want to desert them, but they have got some massive structural problems that they're not going to sort out by getting closer together. And personally, I think us leaving the EU will hasten its breakup. I think even if we stay in, it'll fail within 10 or 15 years.
The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
The European Pig Producers Congress took place in Dublin last week. There I met Dutch economist Robert Hosta to discuss solutions to the price crisis in the sector.
I'm Robert Hosta. I'm a pig production economist at Agricultural Economics Research Institute in Wageningen. Wageningen University and Research Centre.
Robert, fascinating insight into how you see pig production going. You're maybe not so keen on third market exports or subsidies, but is it inevitable maybe that the era of subsidies will come for pig farmers in Europe?
I don't think so. Politically, I think there's no support for subsidies because pig sector has always been seen as a grain-based sector. So as long as the grain production is organized well, then the pig sector will follow. The same holds to the poultry sector. Well, you can doubt whether that's true, but at least that is said. So I think there's politically no ground to make it a subsidized sector. And I would say also the stronger entrepreneurs act without subsidies. And we better focus on strong entrepreneurship. So maybe that's an advice to the European Union or to countries, to member states, to improve entrepreneurship to farmers because they have to deal with increased risks, increased uncertainties. So I would suggest to improve entrepreneurship rather than subsidy system.
And then on the other side of that, export markets. Farmers can only be as efficient as possible. Do they not need those third markets to export their produce to?
Okay, well, there is some need for export. At least the ears and the tails, etc., those products that we don't eat. But as soon as we are focusing on export for noble products like common meat, then we face these risks. So we need the export markets for the lower value products. Well, actually, the prices are quite good at the moment, but at least we value them lower, the tails and the nails, etc. But the consumers in other parts of the world do appreciate it. So please sell it to the third market, but for the noble parts, we should focus on the home market.
And will there be that, or does there need to be that production in sow numbers, as you say, with pig farmers getting more efficient by piglet numbers increasing and litter sizes increasing? Look, who has to make that step to reduce sow numbers?
Well, the price is the force. So the price is not too bad now. So at the moment, no sow farmer will stop production probably. But as soon as the price is going down due to circumstances that is not in our hands, like the currency exchange ratios or whatever, then sow farmers will decide to stop, especially in eastern part of Europe, as we've seen it always. But as there are only 15% of the sows in Eastern Europe and the new member states, there will also be need for reduction of sow numbers in Western Europe countries. And that is what I hear also here in Ireland, but also in other countries, there will be a reduction of sow numbers just by individual decisions of farmers. They're entrepreneurs and they decide, well, I have to stop production because I can't afford anymore. So the market will do the work. And if you would organize it differently, if you would have, let's say, a quotation system, then the quotation system would do the work. Then you can turn on the screw and say, okay, now this year we need 2% less sows, so everyone is reducing the sow numbers 2%. Whether that would be a good system, you can discuss it, but at least that's another option. So either the market is doing the work via the price or some quotation system.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Meanwhile, agribusiness editor Owen Lowry was at Alltech's One Vision conference in the US. He spoke with the feed company's Chief Innovation Officer, Aidan Connolly, and its China-based Business Development Director, Ian Lahiff.
This conference has seen 3,000 people pass through its doors over the last number of days. How did it come about?
I suppose, as you're aware, we've been holding this conference for nearly 30 years, and one of the comments that we get back a little bit is that, like a lot of conferences, great questions, creating great questions, lots of great questions. What about some answers? So this year we actually sat down and tried to create a conference that was about giving some of those answers. So that's probably best embodied in the One Vision exhibition that we had. As you walk through that exhibition, you see ideas about how to produce food in desert areas, how to conserve water better, how can we get more out of the feed, can we be antibiotic free? I mean, really, truly antibiotic free. What should we be doing with regards to pesticides? What does the consumer of the future look like? And that whole vision of how the food production system is changing, and positive ideas about, we picked 2050, so what by 2050, one idea should you have put in place? But I think apart from being an extremely positive conference, we tried to ensure that this conference was about ideas, it was about answers, it wasn't just about questions.
One of the biggest themes that I've seen is the water challenge. That has come across very clear in a lot of the presentations. But another theme that I've seen is you give a talk on antibiotics and the challenges coming down the road in relation to that. Maybe just give us a bit of a background as to that.
Yeah, antibiotic resistance is the major killer. You probably saw this week's Economist magazine front page cover describing that one person will die every 3 seconds due to antibiotic resistance by 2050. That's 10 million people a year. So when governments, when legislators, when people creating the rules or making decisions, they're very focused on agriculture. A lot of that focus is probably unfair. We've already put in place a lot of very good policies with regards to reducing the amount of antibiotics being used in feed. But frankly, we are a target because it's an industry that's easier to control and easier to educate perhaps than even humans and consumers of antibiotics at home. So my talk just showed how it can be done, how it can be done profitably. It doesn't require increases in cost. I'm not just talking about antibiotics in the feed, but also in the water, the hatchery, wherever. But I showed that there are ways to use some of these natural therapies, natural ingredients, natural supplements in the feed and in the water that keep the animals healthy and productive.
So how does a company like Alltech, how can that benefit against this challenge of the antibiotics?
So Alltech provides some of those supplements, and we would work with the largest food companies in the world, Tyson Foods, Smithfield, Cactus Feeders on beef cattle. We work with dairy producers. We try to show them how to reduce the levels that they're using continuously. Does not occur in Ireland, I appreciate, but around the world, still a lot of that happening. Try to eliminate the continuous use. And when they use therapeutic levels, that they use them in the right way to cure something in conjunction with some of the natural supplements that we have.
Aidan, thanks very much. It's an absolutely fascinating conference. I've thoroughly enjoyed the last 3 days here and look forward to coming back next year. Thank you. I'm here with Ian Lahiff, who's the new Business Development Director with Alltech, who's based out in China. And I'd like to talk to you, Ian, just a little bit about the Chinese market. What are the opportunities, I suppose, the challenges out there at the moment? Especially we hear a lot about China. It has 20% of the world's population. They're moving more and more towards a Western diet. So how do you see it? Where are they getting the beef at the moment? Are they rearing it on their own farms, or are they importing a lot?
That's a good question, and there are three major sources, and the first are kind of certified imports, so imports that are coming through verified ports, and though there are two major sources. One is South America, which is your Uruguay, Brazil, Argentina, and that would be the lower kind of price because they've got scale. And then Australia and New Zealand would be make up the other 50% of the legal exports. Australia would be in pole position because they have a free trade agreement and a good brand in the market. But then if you look at it, because of drought in Australia, the cow numbers are going down. Because of that, there's a latent demand, particularly for beef, and one of the big players is India. So because India has 100 million dairy cows and a 20% replacement rate, so that's 20 million culled cows, and of course Indians don't really eat beef, so a lot of that meat is coming through Vietnam and being smuggled into China. Industry estimates would say that there were 3 million tonnes that went through Vietnam last year, which shows that there's huge latent demand when you think Ireland produces a total of 500,000 tonnes.
Which is still closed off to us in Ireland currently, despite there being many trade missions and promises that the market would open up. It's still not fully open to us.
Yeah, and I think where we need to temper our expectations and hope, because Ireland is a post-BSE country, we should look to what Canada has been offered and what Canada does in China, which is a very small proportion of the beef. So what Canada is offered and Ireland is being offered the same thing, is unboned cuts under 30 months. So no carcasses allowed in, none of the fifth quarter. So you essentially have to divert some of your high quality meat into China and it would be at a high price. And you'd have to pay. You'd have a tariff on it as well, because EU-China doesn't have a free trade agreement. So that's the offer that's on the table. And in 2015, it was agreed at a national level that access would be allowed for that type of beef. But things have slowed down recently again, and there was an issue in the UN where there was a Human Rights Council vote, and Ireland were on the council. And signed a declaration that criticised China on human rights, and China obviously knows that beef access is a big issue between the countries, and potentially this might slow down the process.
How far away do you think we are from having full market access? Do you think it's another 6 months, or have you any indications from what you're seeing?
I know that the government would be very hopeful in having that visit this year, and that would lead, I think, by the end of the year that you would see maybe a certain amount of beef coming in.
Maybe just to touch on dairy, we see a lot around China importing less dairy products. What have you noticed on the ground, and how are their farms developing? Are they increasing the amount of production on farms?
Well, I suppose the first thing is that if we take up the Chinese dairy consumption, I think it's not growing as fast as people projected, and that's partly because dairy products have been priced out of the market for the average consumer, and also dairy hasn't become a daily staple for everyone. People maybe don't like the taste of fresh milk as much as people thought, and then the infant formula market is quite complicated as well. You've got Chinese companies going out to places like New Zealand, setting up their own formula and sending it back in and cutting out the premium. So that premium market is gone and is disappearing, but I just don't think the consumption is as strong as people think. To put it all in context, some of the Chinese farms are having an awful time. Modern Dairy Group is the largest dairy farming group in the world. They have 220,000 cows on about 18 farms.
Wow.
They have 600 tonnes of excess milk every day that they have to powder. And obviously, because their costs are much higher than New Zealand, their powdered stock is just not making money. The next biggest one is Weishan Dairy, 180,000. And they are beginning to do veal calves because they have so much excess dairy powder that they're tweaking that to make veal in a way of using the stock. So it's a very depressed consumer market, and there's a lot of latent stock. And again, it's worrying to me to see that a lot of farmers have invested with the idea that by expanding that there was a strong market for the milk. And I think that there needs to be much more of an effort to reach the middle classes in China, to build an Irish brand in China, and maybe, you know, to start to develop some brand loyalty, because now consumers in China, the average consumer wouldn't really be loyal to any country's milk.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
At last Friday's Irish Uplands Forum conference, Tommy Moyles asked Trisha Dean about the issues facing landowners on the McGilly-Cuddy Reeks Access Forum.
So the forum was set up 2 years ago to manage recreation and manage issues in the Reeks. So there was a lot of issues with commercial guides using the land without the landowner's permission. The Reeks are 100% in private ownership. It's all privately owned land, either in private sections or in commonage, shared commonage. So there was lots of issues, mostly with dogs, guides, but there was huge erosion issues as well. We set up the forum then to manage those issues. We were very concerned in the McGilly-Cuddy Expansion Access Forum, and the landowners are on the forum, so the landowners have a voice. That's very important. It's not all state agencies. It is bottom up, so the landowners tell me what their issues and concerns are, and we try to address them at the table. The biggest thing that's coming across at the moment is future farming. They feel like, one of the landowners told me the other day, he feels like a dinosaur. And I started kind of laughing. I said, why do you feel like a dinosaur? And he said, because we're dying out. He said, we're the last generation of farmers. He said, upland sheep farming is not being resourced. It's not being seen by the Department of Agriculture as viable. And he said, all they're doing is cutting payments. Lots of problems, and it could be gorse, it could be furze, cut, and no solutions in sight. So we are going to try and develop an agro-environmental scheme with the landowners, because if something's not done very, very quickly, there'll be no one farming sheep in the Reeks from now on.
Is that going to be Reek specific, or could it be rolled out in other similar areas?
It could be rolled out in other areas. We are going to do it just for the Reeks, because that's our main body of concern obviously, the Reeks Forum. But it could. They are talking about doing a number of locally led agro-environmental schemes. We think that's a great idea, because each area is completely different with different issues.
The Irish Farmers Journal weekly podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
You can vote for the Irish Country Music Awards at www.farmersjournal.ie and win tickets to the event in our print edition. Daniel O'Donnell will present the show live on RTE on the 24th of June, and Irish Country Living editor Mairead Lavery asked him for his views on Ireland's country music tradition.
Daniel, are you very excited about the awards?
Absolutely. It's a fantastic event. You know, it's going to be a fantastic event. I suppose all of us involved in country music have wished for this to happen on our national station for years and years. And just the recognition that so many people in Ireland love country music. I mean, it's been part of Irish life for as long as I can remember, and it just goes from generation to generation. And I think now, more than ever, you know, the younger people singing and the younger people coming to the dances again like it was years ago. It's just fantastic. So to have this recognition of the music on television is going to be just the icing on the cake.
As part of the Farmers Journal team, we're absolutely delighted to sponsor these events. And you're saying now that country music is more popular really than you've seen it at any stage in your career?
Well, it's certainly, I suppose, from when you go back to the 60s, you know, you had all the singers that some of them are still singing now, and they had a huge following. And then I suppose for a wee while there was a transition of going into discos and all that, maybe in the 80s. And then I started about 1985, 86.
I remember your Christmas album,
you know,
and the ad you did on television.
That's right,
It was fantastic.
And then, you know, we had there was a great upsurge then, and then I suppose it went on, and now in the last 4 or 5 years, you know, with all the young, John McNichol and Derek Ryan and Lisa McHugh, Nathan and Jimmy and all, although I'd be saying Jimmy's young, he's nearly as old as me, nearly as old as myself. He better not hear that.
Anyway, listen,
but
we're
it's
looking
fantastic.
Forward to the night.
It's going to be
the same
great.
As we are
and
in
I mean, it's great that you have sponsored it. I mean, all of these things need sponsorship, but I think that it's testament to the Irish people. I suppose there is that connection between the Farmers Journal, the Irish people, country music. It's like an intermingling of three components that should be together.
Fit.
Yes, a perfect fit.
And we look forward to the 24th.
Absolutely.
And you're hosting the night?
I'm honoured to be doing it, you know, to be asked to do
well,
it.
Listen, you'll be brilliant.
Well, sure, I'll do
and we
my
look
best.
Forward to it.
Absolutely, and we all
Thank you very much,
Not
Daniel.
at all, Maria.
Thank you.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Finally, if you're dreading the night before your Leaving Cert exams, Irish Country Living is here to help. Our education editor, Mary Phelan, shares the details with Ciara Leahy.
Mary, next week is D-Day for Leaving Cert students all around the country. I think no matter how long since you've done the Leaving Cert, you still get a kind of a little jump in your stomach. Don't really want to think about how many years it's been for me. How many years has it been for you?
10 years, Ciara. 10-year anniversary of the Leaving Cert. Woohoo!
So people, you do get through it. But obviously for those that are doing it this year, you're thinking ahead. And we here at the Farmers Journal are coming to the rescue with a Leaving Cert Q&A powered by Pubble. So Mary, what exactly is this?
First of all, can I just say that the weather is absolutely gorgeous. I don't know if you've noticed.
Absolutely.
And people are starting to plan their weddings for the Leaving Cert weekend because the weather is guaranteed to be so good. So my sympathies to those of you studying who can't go outside. But it's nearly over. We're nearly there. And we, in the Farmers Journal, we are here to help with the Leaving Cert. So when all of your teachers have gone home for the summer and say it's the night before your biology exam and you have a question that really only your biology teacher can answer, well, that's where we step in, because we have teamed up with a private school in Cork, Hewitt College, and we are offering our Leaving Cert readers access to expert teachers the night before their exams. So every evening between 7 and 8, Hewitt College teachers will be available on the Farmers Journal website, so you can talk to them live, you can ask your questions live, they will respond to you live as well, and it will be on the subjects that are being examined the very next day. So we don't have a teacher for every single subject, but we do for the ones being sat by the most students, I guess. And in this week's Country Living, you can see a timetable of exactly what subjects we're doing and the dates they are, and the night before the teachers that we will have there talking about those subjects.
So it's beginning next Tuesday night, which is the night before English Paper 1. Who will ever forget that? And Home Economics. But can you give me some examples of questions that were asked last year that the teachers might be able to help?
So really, I mean, the teachers that we have on board, they are experts in their subjects, and I guess they're used to getting students through courses quite quickly, and the students in grind schools do tend to come out at very high points, as everyone knows. So, I mean, really, you can ask them anything. They will have the answers to hand. So last year, some of the questions asked were like, any tips to control nerves? Then for English, someone asked, which questions in section 1 would you recommend starting with? Then for Ag Science, someone asked, this is quite specific, when asked for the principles of reproduction of animals, how do you go about answering? Do you just give general points? And then another one, which I guess could apply to a lot of subjects, how long should a 30-mark question be? Should it be half page? Should it be 1 page? How much time should you spend on each question? So these are the things that some of them you mightn't actually think about until the night before, so it'd be great to have a teacher there on hand who can kind of give you the answers straight away.
Tell me a little more about the teachers answering the questions.
So, for example, the home ec teacher, so she'll be there on Tuesday the 7th of June. Her name is Claire Maloney. She's from Mitchelstown. She's been teaching at Hewitt College for 2 years. Then the geography teacher is Dr. Eleanor Solon, and she has contributed articles to Irish Geography and Geographical Viewpoint. Eleanor has written Geography Model Answers book for Leaving Cert students and Geography Examination Guidelines for both the Junior Cert and the Leaving Cert. And then, for example, the Irish teacher is Elaine Hammond. She has been in Hewitt College since 2002, and she's an experienced state examiner for the Irish oral exams and a corrector for the written exams. So really, the teachers that are there are very, very well qualified when it comes to exams.
Excellent. And look, at the end of the day, you have spent months and months and months studying here. So let's us give our top tips for the night before the Leaving Cert. Mine is definitely to, at some stage, you have to put the book away, go for a walk and clear the head. Mary, what is your tip?
I don't think I should give tips because I didn't sleep very well. If you can get a good night's sleep, all the better. I know that I brought a bag of fruit and a bar of chocolate and a bottle of water, I think, into every exam. So I had a bit of a sugar hit there if I needed it, but I kind of had something refreshing, which was good because I wasn't sleeping very well. But I guess don't take advice from me, but I was talking to some of the teachers in Hewitt College, and the maths teachers, for example, they were both really stressing not to leave any blanks on the paper. And I guess in maths especially, you do get marks for attempting questions. You might get so far with a problem even if you don't solve it. So I mean, if you don't attempt to answer something, you can't get the points. At least if you try, you might know more than you think you know. And for ordinary level, know your definitions and constructions, and on higher level, know your constructions, definitions and theorems as well. So, and for higher level as well, the Hewitt College teacher says not to get bogged down on any one short question, as you can only get a max of 25 marks. And that probably goes for every exam. Don't spend all your time trying to figure out one thing to the detriment of the other questions. Try not to lose sight of that in the exams.
Absolutely. And students, you will get to a time in your life where you don't have to worry about theorems. It does happen. Don't miss details in this week's Irish Country Living, and we will be starting up next Tuesday evening on farmersjournal.ie at 7 o'clock. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ciara.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast online at farmersjournal.ie, on the Irish Farmers Journal app and on iTunes every Thursday. Brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.